So I just watched Resident Evil Death Island and it was good. This video is going to be an unscripted review, so basically I only have Resident Evil 3 footage from my last video. But anyway, let's just talk about this movie. My experience with the Resident Evil CG movies come down to this. I barely remember Degeneration, same with Damnation. Vendetta is the best one out of the series, and I didn't watch Infinite Darkness because it was on Netflix and it would take too long to watch for me. I'd say this movie is less enjoyable than Vendetta, but it's more enjoyable than the other movie. And it's actually because we haven't seen these characters in such a long time that we tend to miss them the more games come out and we don't see them anymore. For this movie, they essentially tried to Marvelize the cast. So we have Chris, Claire, Jill, Rebecca, and Leon all together for an adventure in Alcatraz. You do get your obvious cliches and power level BS in this movie because, you know, the characters are way too powerful and that's why they won't put them in any other games that isn't their remakes. But the cast usually gets some good moments and good dialogue scenes together, but at the same time, there are places where it feels underdeveloped. There will be a spoiler section of the video where I will go into that into more detail, but I will say that the concept itself and that the fact that the dialogue references other games and their relevance to the story I really enjoyed. I also really found myself enjoying the villain and his little quirks. Without going into too much spoilers, they do somewhat connect him to the games, but it's done in a way that actually works. There are also some creative action and fight scenes in this movie, but it's less than the other movies. And that's mostly because they had a new animation studio on this movie. Death Island was animated by Quickie. They're all the same animation studio who animated Infinite Darkness, and they also done works for Final Fantasy XVI, Bravely Default, as well as Shadowbringers and most of their CG cutscenes. And I'm not gonna lie, their animation style feels a bit flat. Like, sure, there are some creative scenes, but the animation just feels really off. Like, when the action gets over the top, it is over the top, but it isn't as, like, creatively over the top, like you would see in something like Resident Evil Vendetta. Mars Animation animated Vendetta, and it really shows that they are a much more experienced studio that was willing to go really over the top with their action scenes. You notice how that movie is the only one that people share clips of on Twitter? Exactly. Speaking of Vendetta, they do bring back one of the villains from Vendetta, and unironically, she is one of the best parts of the movie with her action scenes. But it really goes to show how much of a downgrade the animation took from switching from Marza to Quickie. There was also a use of stock sound effects that I really didn't like. I mean, I know this is a nitpick, but like, if I'm hearing the same metal pipe sound that I use in Discord soundboards, it does get a bit jarring and distracting. And of course, there are some plot threads that don't make any sense. We'll go more into detail in the spoiler talk of the video, and the one thing I really didn't like about this movie was Jill's design. I feel that Jill's design in this movie wasn't great at all. Essentially what they did was give her her RE3 remake design without even considering what that means. All the other characters are more grown up and have their type of designs there. Jill only has her RE3 remake clothes and hair. If you don't remember Resident Evil 5, her hair turned blonde due to the experiments from Wesker, and they don't explain why it's back to her regular hair color. As I mentioned, they also give her her RE3 make clothes, which I'm pretty sure in that game she mentioned that she was going to burn them.
Oh god. I'm definitely burning these clothes.
So instead of giving her new clothes that would have fit for this adventure, as well as showcase a post RE5 Jill, they just got lazy and did this for marketing purposes. The only aspect of her design that they actually brought over from RE5 is her boobs. Anyways, without going into spoilers, this is really all I have for the non-spoiler talk. So anyways, spoilers, 3, 2, 1, you know the time code, whatever, let's go. Like I mentioned, the main villain's motifs and motivations I really loved. They tied him into the Raccoon City incident, and while his quirks I didn't get at first, it of course made more sense as context was built throughout the movie, especially with him hitting his cane. I loved that. The virus was also a nice spin on the formula too. Although the characters do suffer from plot armor. With citizens, it took them like 5 seconds to get infected and fully turn, but then it takes like everyone like 10 hours to not even turn at all. I mean, this is the first time that Chris was infected with a virus plot-wise, you know, he's probably got that dog in him and he's probably fighting in the inside or whatever. But Claire, on the other hand, she keeps showing symptoms and like they're saying she's about to turn, but then like 10 minutes later, she's just fine attending to some other guy's wounds in the next scene. Like, they don't even show her convulsing during this scene, and this happens after she starts convulsing. So that was just really weird. And like I mentioned, I also really like scenes with Chris and Jill talking about stuff that happened in previous games that they never really talked about. Like, you have Chris bringing up Pierce to Jill and how he's been surviving and how the numbness of them fighting is like taking a toll on them. And like Jill's responding, yeah, I'm numb to this because even our villains are numb to this or whatever. I thought it was a really great scene. Although I feel that the movie doesn't fully resolve that, which I guess wasn't the point, but I kind of wish that plot thread got resolved, you know? One of the major themes of the movie is that the characters, you know, Jill, Chris, Rebecca, Claire, and Leon, they're essentially pawns in a major scheme or whatever, because they work for all these different corporations that essentially don't actually want to save the world, but, you know, they're just in it for the money. I like that the movie touched upon this because it ties into later events in the games. Because the villain starts going off about how, you know, they're the heroes or whatever. But then you have Chris working for the BSAA. If you played Resident Evil Village, you'll see now that the BSAA are essentially the bad guys now, and they're actually using bioweapons in order to fight bioweapons. I mean, they were doing that before in Resident Evil 5, but it's more clearer in Village. Same with the other corporations like TerraSave with Claire, or, you know, yeah. I really like that the movie touched upon that, even if it's just for a little bit, because it kind of ties into the overall theming of the series. And it was funny because I was actually talking about this in my Resident Evil 3 Remake video, where essentially Umbrella also was kind of the same way, except, you know, they were of course more clear. But I was wrapping up my video as I was watching this movie, so like, it was kind of convenient, I guess. The sea lickers were cool, but they barely got, you know, introduced. Like, they just put, like, a whole cage of sea lickers and release them to the waters. And then they have one scene, and it's a good scene, with Leon and Jill just fighting them. It's not really them fighting, it's like, one starts sniffing them out, and then Jill is like, get away from me! And then they have to make a sound, and they run, and then they all explode. I mean, it's a cool concept that they can bring into the later games, possibly, but, you know, neat idea, just kind of underdeveloped. Also, the way Rebecca got onto the island was just stupid. Like, she's on speed dial with, like, backup and a vaccine, so when she actually finally develops that vaccine, she travels with an undefined SWAT team, and then once they get to the island, they just all die because like a big shark comes and attacks them. And you know, these guys have weapons, armors, grenades, and whatever, but she's just fine. She was standing on a water bridge or something like that, but then, you know, everyone gets wiped out, but she's totally fine. And then when she meets Jill in the sewer, she's like, yeah, all my backup died, but you know, I got the vaccine. Like, she doesn't care the fact that all these people died because of her stupid decisions. Like, yep, I'm a klutz, how I survived or whatever. It was bad. It was real bad. It's plot convenience in the worst way possible. And the final battle was neat. I did mention the whole Avenger thing, and yeah, it does show his face here. Like, right before that iconic shot that you see in all the trailers, they have a royalty-free ripoff of the Avengers theme with like a trumpet in the background. I'm not complaining, but yeah, it's clear what they were going for this. Especially when throughout the fight, the characters are doing all these sort of quips, which I know, Resident Evil, whatever, but like, it gets really noticeable. But overall, the movie was just alright. I think it could have been better. It's like, if you're a fan of the series, you will enjoy this. But if you're not as invested in the story like most fans are, your enjoyment will vary. If you're a Resident Evil fan, you probably have already seen this movie, but if you want to put it on for like a Discord call, I guess it'll be a fine enough ride for you. But you know, I kind of was a little disappointed. Not fully at all. I still thought the movie was alright. but I kind of wish it was a bit more action-packed or more fun. It just kind of existed, you know? It wasn't like Resident Evil Vendetta when I can recommend that movie to like literally anyone. Like even when my friends here really enjoyed Vendetta, but they kind of thought this movie was pretty mid. I'll have to rewatch the other two movies to fully give my like ranking of the movies, but I guess it would be like a number 3 spot, I think. I have to rewatch Damnation to fully give that, you know? And of course Degeneration. But overall, I do think it's a fun time, and if you are a Resident Evil fan, you probably will enjoy this. If you're not a huge Resident Evil fan that's not invested that much into the lore, you're probably not going to. That's usually how these movies are, but here, you really felt that.